Hello, my name is Claudia Gomez Reyes. We're going to talk today about the chain of infection. It's also called the cycle of infection. The cycle of infection is also called the chain of infection because it is a chain. Begins with the transmission of a pathogen. It occurs when the agent leaves its receiver or host through a portal of exit. It is transported by some way of transmission and enters through a convenient portal of entry to infect a defenseless host. The chain of infection is also a way of gathering the information needed to interrupt that epidemic, even worse, a pandemic. Each of the links in the chain must be suitable to the organism for the epidemic to continue. Breaking any connection in the chain can interrupt the epidemic. The most effective target to break the chain will depend on the organism. So we have the infectious disease or the pathogen, we have the receiver or the host, we have the portal of exit, which will be how it will be exiting that host. We have the mode of transmission, how it will transmit to the other organism, to another organism, or to another person. The portal of entry is how that person or that organism will enter the body, and the susceptible host will be persons that have low immune defense, low immunity, and are very susceptible to get these organism or the infectious disease. For an infection to develop, each link of the chain must be connected. Breaking any link of the chain can stop the transmission of the infection. And that's how we get rid of those organisms. Now we have here the infectious disease. Any microorganism that can cause a disease, such as a bacteria, a virus, a parasite, a fungus, will be the pathogens or the organisms. Reasons that the organism will cause an infection are virulence, so that's the ability to multiply and grow. Invasiveness, it's the ability to enter that tissue, and pathogenicity is the ability to cause the disease. So from those six elements of the chain, we're going to start by explaining how those germs, bacteria, viruses, parasites are, and how they will go into a host. Okay, so the first is when germs enter the body, they can cause illness, but also the type of organism informs you the types of disinfectants, antiseptics, and antimicrobials to use in order to get rid of them. So that's how we break the chain. So we have diseases, we have bacteria, we have viruses, parasites, fungus. All these can be some of those pathogens. Now we have the receiver. The receiver is of an infection organism is the habitat in which the agent normally lives, grows, and multiplies. The receiver include humans, include animals, include environment. So human receivers can be disease that are transmitted from person to person without an intermediary. It can be a carrier, and it doesn't have to be sick. He doesn't have to be sick, but if you shake his hand, with another person and he has the organism in his hands, when shaking the hand to the other person, that will be transmitted to that other person, even though he doesn't have any symptoms. So that's asymptomatic. There's also an incubatory carriers that are those who can transmit the agent during the incubation period before even the symptoms begin. We have the convalescent carriers, are those who have recovered from the illness but are still capable of transmitting that organism to others. And the chronic carriers are those who continue to foster the pathogen for months, even years after they first got infected. So here we have the human reservoirs, right here and right here. There's also animal reservoirs. Humans can also get diseases that have animal reservoirs. Many of these diseases are transmitted from animal to animal. So let's say the fish is intoxicated, a bigger fish eats it, he gets contaminated, we eat the fish, we get contaminated. And we have the environmental reservoir. Those are plants, soil, and water in the environment that are also reservoirs for some infectious agents. Fungal agents that cause histoplasmosis live and multiply in the soil. Outbreaks of diseases are often traced to water supplies, contaminated food, toys, and sports equipment. So we have the germs in the hand, we have the vegetable that is contaminated, food that's contaminated. We also have the water that is contaminated, believe it or not. Poop, when it goes into somebody else's organism and it has a pathogen, can cause illness in that other organism. Here's the water. Now we're going to see the portal of exit. The portal of exit is the path by which a pathogen or an organism leaves its host. The portal of exit usually corresponds to the site where the pathogen is localized. For example, the influenza viruses and tuberculosis exits through respiratory tract. So you can be coughing, don't know that you have tuberculosis, and somebody else can inhale those airborne the pathogen and can be infected. Schistosomes is a parasitic worm, also known as blood fluke, exits through urine. So right here we have, from urine we have that one and we have this one. The cholera vibrio is an acute diarrheal illness caused by infection of the intestine with the bacterium Vibrio cholera. Exit in feces. Okay. The Sarcoptes scabiei. The scabies is a skin condition by an infestation of the human itch mite called Sarcoptes scabiei, and it exits in skin lesions. So we can see that skin lesions can also be a portal of exit. The enterovirus 70, which can cause hemorrhagic conjunctivitis and exits by conjunctival secretions. Some blood-borne agents can exit by crossing the placenta from mother to fetus. The rubella, the syphilis, the toxoplasmosis, while others exit through cuts or needles in the skin, like hepatitis B, or blood-sucking arthropods, which is the malaria. So here we have several examples. The pathogens leaving the organism, right here too, in the blood, in the urine, in poop, by the skin. The next step is the way of transmission. So the way of transmission of an infectious agent or an organism may be transmitted from its natural reservoir to a susceptible host in different ways. There are different classifications for the modes of transmission. It can be direct contact or indirect contact. Direct contact occurs through skin-to-skin contact, kissing, and sexual intercourse. Direct contact also refers to contact with soil or vegetation that has that infectious organism. The droplets spread refers to spray, relatively large, short-range aerosols produced by sneezing, coughing, or even talking. Droplet spreads is classified as direct because transmission is by direct spray over a few feet before the droplets fall to the ground. The indirect transmission refers to transfer of infectious agents from reservoirs to a host by suspended air particles, inanimate objects like vehicles, or animate intermediaries like vectors. Airborne transmission occurs when infectious agents are carried by dust or droplets. Dust or droplets. Dust of droplets, and are suspended in the air for several time, for a matter of time. Vehicles that indirectly transmit that infectious agent include food, water, biological products like blood, and fomites, inanimate objects such as handkerchiefs, bedding, or surgical scalpels. A vehicle may passively carry a pathogen. Vectors such as mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks may carry an infectious agent through purely mechanical means or may support growth or changes in the agent. Stool, fecal to oral route, contact with blood and body fluids, or a needle stick injury. So we have these are means by which that organism is transferred from one carrier to the other. So we have here by surgical instruments, we have airborne, we have kissing, we have the mosquitoes, we have dust, we have the sprays, and we have the direct contact hand by hand. The portal of entry. The portal of entry is just the opening where an infection disease enters the host body, such as mucous membranes, open wounds, or tubes inserted in the body cavities, like urinary catheters or feeding tubes. This is an NG tube. This is doing a VE. Here we have also catheters. We have here mucus. We have wounds, another catheter, and another catheter, and open wounds. The portal of entry must provide access to tissues in which the pathogen can multiply or a toxin can act. Often infectious agents use same portals to enter a new host that they use to exit the source host. Influenza virus, I have somebody sneezing here. Influenza virus exits the respiratory tract of the source host and enters the respiratory tract of the new host. In contrast, many pathogens can cause gastroenteritis, follow a so-called fecal-oral route because they exit the source host in feces and are carried onto inadequately washed hands to a vehicle such as food, water, or utensils and enter a new host through the mouth. Other portals of entry include the skin, like I told you, here in an open wound, the mucous membranes, and blood, by blood. And finally, we have the susceptible host, which are people or person who is at risk for developing an infection from the disease. This means that their immune system is deficient, so they can contract that pathogen easily or easier than a person that has a good immunity response. So the final link of the chain of infection is susceptible host. Susceptibility of a host depends on genetic or constitutional factors, specific immunity, and non-specific factors that affect an individual's ability to resist that infection. A person with sickle cell anemia seems to be partially protected from particular type of malaria. Specific immunity refers to protective antibodies that are directed against that specific agent. Such antibodies may develop in response to an infection. It can be a vaccine or a toxoid, which are toxins that have been deactivated but retains its capacity to stimulate production of toxin antibodies, or may be acquired by transplacental transfer from mother to fetus or by injection of antitoxin or immune globulin. Non-specific factors that defend against infections include the skin, mucous membrane, gastric acidity, and cilia in the respiratory tract, and the cough reflex. Factors that may increase that susceptibility is infections by disrupting those host defenses, including malnutrition, alcoholism, or diseases or therapy that impairs the non-specific immune response to react. Infants, elderly, ill people, debilitated people, children who are not immunized or have undeveloped immune system are people that are more susceptible for contracting that disease or that pathogen. And here we have some of examples like malnutrition, elderly patients, somebody that smokes, or alcoholism, like we said before, a children that is sick, or an elderly that is sick, like here. So those are very weak immune systems. This is the cycle or the chain of an infection. That's basically it. Thank you very much.